in which you appear today.
My name is Vicky Xu. I'm a journalist and I'm a senior fellow at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute.
My name is Badiucao. I'm a China-born artist. I'm also Australian citizen. My art is focusing on human rights issues and social issues around the world, particularly on China.
Thank you very much for both of your time, in particular you, Badiucao. I think you've woken up very early in Europe to join us to connect, which we're very grateful for. I'll invite you each to make an opening statement, after which the committee will direct questions to you. Ms Xu, did you have an opening statement you wish to make?
In relation to...
You don't have to. We're familiar with your experience, so we can certainly just direct questions to you about that if you don't wish to make an opening statement. And what about you, Badiucao? Do you wish to make an opening statement?
Yeah, I will have a small one.
Please.
Well, as a China-born artist that I've been battling with China's online influence and propaganda for a very long time. And I think particularly at this moment, the methods and the way that the Chinese government is trying to use the social media to influence the Chinese diaspora outside of China is just getting worse and worse. From my personal experience on the social media, I've been experiencing like identity leak. I was an anonymous artist for a very long time until 2018 that my identity is compromised by China's national security police online. And then what happened is they starting to using WeChat and other methods to harassing my family, particularly back in China. They would actually taking my relatives to the police station for interrogation. To me, because they can reach me directly, so they will use WeChat as a tool in order to get to me, sometimes even pretending to be my relatives. So basically they would hijack or just using my relative's WeChat account in order to calling me or message me to threaten me and interrogate me from making political art that against the Chinese government. I've been receiving death threats almost on a daily basis. That has just been a burden on me every day. And the Chinese government knows that the only way that they can stop the dissident overseas to talking about those very important human rights issues is launching character assassination campaigns. In that way, I've been experiencing like my artist website being faked. So at this moment, my artist website uses a domain as .com. But in the previous years, there has been 2 fake websites being established, very likely by the people associated with the Chinese government. One used .net, one used .co. None of them had anything to do with me. But on those websites, on the front page, it looked like exactly like mine. But in fact, the content is entirely different, and it's become a collection of smear campaign articles from calling me as criminals, traitors, hurting Chinese feeling, to even, framing me as pedophile or something like that. So what they're doing is very clear because they cannot cancel or challenge my artwork. So instead, they're choosing to launch this kind of smear campaign to do the character assassination. In the public front, I do think my personal experience is just a tip of iceberg. Very much so with a platform like WeChat or anything which is made in China. The Chinese government have a total control of it on the content. It's very easy for them to censor in certain topics like the human rights issues. For example, for the Uyghur genocide that happened in Xinjiang or East Turkestan, those topics will never really be allowed to post or sharing on platforms like WeChat. But on the other hand, in the international social media platform, they are very good at using trolling farms to inserting certain propaganda. But in the same time, those trolling farms would having a very good strategy by using the loophole for the security mechanism. For example, on Twitter, they would massively reporting certain accounts without a base. But that kind of campaign was forcing the algorithm or mechanism from Twitter to respond to these reports and suspending the accounts who were targeted. And this methodology has been very useful and common for the Chinese government to silence the criticizing voice that's outside of China. But also, on the other hand, they were also using this technology or technique to creating a delusion of public opinion from Chinese diaspora community, which sometimes will discussing topics definitely in conflicts with national interests of us, Australia. And recently, I also find they are being more bold and aggressive. February this year, we find out, I actually got approached by a person who claimed to be a journalist of Reuters. And eventually, I find out this is actually not the person he claimed to be. Because when I verify with the real Reuters journalist, we find out this is not the person, and it turned out to be there are 3 different persons accounts from Telegram channel and Twitter pretending to be the entire China Bureau of Reuters and using this fake identity to kind of trick dissidents and the Chinese diaspora outside of China, including inside of China, to sending them sensitive information about human rights campaigns and other political opinion. And the way they're using is actually quite sophisticated. So those fake journalists actually have the copy of the real identity part from the journalists. So that's how they're winning your trust. And I'm afraid this might just be a very little part of this big operation, and I have reason to believe there might be more similar technique that has been used by the Chinese government in order to infiltrate and influence a international community.
Thank you. That's a very powerful opening statement. I'm grateful for that. Ms. Xu, I just want to direct a question to you. I know you've had similar experiences online that Badiucao has just described he's experienced. In your case, they've provided a very unfortunate case study that's been able to be examined, including by your colleagues at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, of the very concerted and coordinated the way that you've been singled out and targeted online, including, I think, demonstrating that the targeted online harassment directed at you maps with office hours in Beijing for people who are clearly employed to do this, including that there's a lull during the lunch break time when they take a break from harassing you to go and have some lunch. Can you talk a little bit about your experience, when this started, what you think the motivation of it is, and what the main platforms it's been that it's happened on?
Thank you for the question. I've been, I've been a journalist, initially for the New York Times and the ABC, and later on moved on to a more focused research, long-form research reports for ASPE. And during my, frankly, not very long journalism career from 2016 to now, so 6-7 years, throughout this entire time, the Chinese government has been attempting to silence, intimidate, and harass me. And specifically from 2019, when I was reporting on protests that were happening in Australia in relation to the Hong Kong protests. So there were 2 sides in Australia. There were Australians or Chinese Australians protesting in solidarity with the Hong Kongers, and people in Australia protesting or rallying in support of Hong Kong police brutality. So because of my reporting on that, the Chinese internet, whether that's orchestrated by someone, whether that's just voluntary sort of anger from the people, I don't know, but there was a large online social harassment campaign. There was an online harassment campaign that occurred on this platform called Weibo, which had such an impact on my family life that I became estranged with my father. And then from there on, I spent 2 or 3 years writing about the human rights crisis in Xinjiang. And specifically, there was a report called Uyghurs for Sale with the Australian Strategic Policy Institute that was published in March 2020. Now, Uyghurs for Sale detailed how the Chinese government has subject a large percentage of the Uyghur population to forced labor, working for the supply chains, factories and suppliers of 83 well-known global brands. That includes famous brands like Nike, Adidas, Apple, Google, and these things that we use every day in our daily lives. So because of the influence and impact of that report, the Chinese government decided that I and perhaps SB also are responsible for disrupting China's supply chains and causing financial damages to the state. So following that, the Chinese government, I would describe this behavior as that they canceled me personally. So in the sense that, tens of media outlets published articles calling me a traitor, a slut, a drug addict. And these are, of course, attempts to character assassinate me. And social media specifically played a big role in this so-called cancellation, because there are hundreds of accounts pumping out content, and that goes across the entirety of the Chinese internet. So from your WeChat, Weibo, to the Chinese version of Quora, which is Zhihu, to these video platforms, the Chinese, again, equivalent of YouTube, because in China people can access YouTube. So you have the Xigua videos, iQIYI videos, Bilibili, and these are all popular platforms that young people watch day in, day out. And these are young people not just in China, but Chinese-speaking individuals and also people who are interested in China from overseas. They can all access all this information. So because the state essentially made me an example of a traitor, so a lot of people, content makers, jumped on this bandwagon and started denouncing me. This led to the result of the sort of the complete breakdown of basically all of my personal relationships I've had in the first 19 years of everybody I've ever known in China. My grandfather banned everyone from speaking to me ever again in my family. My childhood friends, their boyfriends who have now become influencers are denouncing me and describing me, my immoral behaviors on Chinese social media. And this also sort of spilled over to YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, the Western social media platforms. And one kind of funny, but really not funny event was that what we believe to be the Chinese Ministry of State Security, and we have good evidence, I have good evidence for that, repeatedly interrogated a close friend of mine who was a student in Australia and studied in Australia for years, went back to China to visit family. She was known to have a close relationship with me, so the Chinese secret police interrogated her repeatedly to gain information about my personal life. And then around that dossier of information, they built this completely ludicrous account of who I am, and made a documentary about my supposed drug-infested, promiscuous private life, made a 4-part documentary about that, and dropped it on YouTube on Christmas in 2021. Sorry, 2020. This was supposed to, the Chinese government does this a lot, dropping intense things on Christmas because Western journalists would be would be taking time off with their family, and nobody would be able to report on this. And that extremely negative content and very defamatory content is there to stay. Once it's on the internet, it's there forever. And personally, like Badiucao, I'm still dealing with death threats. I'm still dealing with repeated hacking attempts. Just this week, I received, I'd say, like a dozen hacking attempts across all of my accounts. I'm obviously still doing my journalism work, but I've had to adapt my the way I live, my lifestyle to one that's akin to a criminal, I would say. People in democracies, politicians, academics, people with good social standing tell me things like I'm going to end up in history books, and that all sounds grand, but what about life? I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Can I say both of your testimony is very, very powerful, and it is experiences like yours, which the committee is not just determined to hear, but to act on, and to the extent to which it was within the control of the Australian government, address as much as possible. I'm particularly interested in both of your opinions on, as members of the Chinese Australian diaspora, as to how we should think about and how we should confront problems posed by platforms like WeChat, which are obviously headquartered, based in China and subject to the control of the Chinese Communist Party, but very widely used in Chinese diaspora communities, not just in Australia and around the world. We've had some witnesses before us who say we should contemplate banning it, others who should say we should take steps short of that, but be prepared to keep that on the table. Do you have views about these platforms? We obviously understand that they are important tools for Chinese Australians and others to use, and we understand there'd be impacts on them from banning it or restricting it in some way. So I'm interested in both of your opinions on that.
Okay, I can go first. In my opinion, I think WeChat has become this very toxic headquarters for misinformation and propaganda for the Chinese government. But in the same time that users, no matter you're inside China or outside China in Australia, that the space for the free speech to survive is just zero. Like I mentioned earlier, that there's always certain topics that you cannot talk about. What happened is what you say will be disappeared, or even your account will be suspended. And this is actually a typical way how the Chinese government manages to export its censorship outside of China, regardless, local law and rights protection in domestic, like in Australian society. This is totally, in contradictory with our values. But unfortunately, for the Chinese diaspora and other people who are using WeChat, that we actually have to be subject to China's law, which is not really a law for society. And this, for me, is very unfair and fundamentally dangerous to our national security and core value of the society. So I do believe that there must be some regulation to be introduced.
Oh, I'm sorry, I think we've just lost your feed there.
WeChat as a company to the Australian market, and okay.
Yeah, but just to interrupt, sorry, your feed is kind of dropping in and out. It might be a good idea just to turn off the video, and that might improve the audio quality, because I want to make sure we capture this evidence on Hansard for the committee to use. I don't want to miss any of it. Just to let you know, you started to say that you think that some form of regulation is necessary. If you could go back to that point and expand from there.
So based on the argument, I do believe Australians should have regulation to kind of making companies like WeChat following our laws, to respecting our way of life and value our freedom of speech. If they fail to obeying those regulations, then punishment or even banning should be a possible option for us to take in order to protect our rights for the people who are living in Australia. This has nothing to do with racism or xenophobia. This is actually to defend universal human rights. And this is also how, the Chinese diaspora can benefit from this mechanism, because now we don't need to, being subject to the Chinese government's tyranny and control. And regardless we're using Chinese or English, Mandarin or Cantonese, with any platform, we shall have the right to say and express ourselves instead of being censored and controlled and intimidated by this foreign government in China.
Thank you. Ms. Xu?
Yes, so in my both personal and professional opinion, I think banning TikTok, no, sorry, that just came out so naturally. Banning WeChat, banning WeChat would, in fact, cause a lot of resentment and backlash in the Chinese diaspora community, just because in order to stay in touch with people's families and friends back home, and WeChat is absolutely essential. It's the main communication platform in China, which means in order to participate in social life, even if just virtually in China, it's a must. So I think banning it would make the Australian government appear to be more authoritarian than it could ever be. But I do think there are things that we can do, which is, to educate. So for example, whenever I talk to a, primarily Chinese audience, I would be telling people how I use WeChat, which is that I use it on a separate phone. I do take it to extreme just because I need to keep a higher standard of cyber hygiene. But how I would do it is I would keep it on a separate phone, and I would use it only on networks that are not my homework, but far away, physically far away. But I think, an ordinary Australian person who doesn't need to worry too much about either state persecution or even Chinese state surveillance, a simple thing they could do is to buy the cheapest phone and have WeChat, have TikTok on that separate phone, and that solves a lot of the problems. But end of the day, I do think what the government can do is to inform people that they are taking a risk by using WeChat and educating them on how they might be able to mitigate those risks. How can they use WeChat in smarter ways and without exposing themselves to, but people know. People know WeChat spies on them. I think every Chinese person who uses WeChat knows that. End of the day, it's a personal choice. Maybe I'm not being very helpful here.
No, that is helpful. Your perspective is unique and valuable, so thank you. I do have more questions, but I want to share the call with my Deputy Chair, Senator Walsh, and I might come back at the end. Senator Walsh. Thank you, Deputy Chair. I just have a final question for both of you, which is your engagement with Australian law enforcement and intelligence agencies, to the extent you're comfortable and able to talk about that in a public forum, and any suggestions you have about how they can do more to help people like you and the experiences you have, because it's obviously not only unacceptable, it's unlawful for people in Australia like yourself to be victims of transnational repression. So what have your engagement been with our law enforcement and intelligence agencies, and how have they helped, or could they help more?
Is it okay if I take this first,
Please.
Badiu?
Yeah.
Yes, sure.
I'll start by saying that the Australian Federal Police, as well as other Australian government agencies, have been extremely attentive and extremely helpful in many cases, especially when it comes to physical harassment that I've unfortunately received. So to give a little bit of background, since I got cancelled by China, I have experienced these strange encounters, such as starting from October last year, 2022, in front of my Australian residence, I would see this man who didn't live there, who had nothing, who had never seen before, who acted strangely, standing right side out of my apartment gate. So at first, I told myself not to be paranoid, not to overthink. It just could be a random Chinese man who happened to be wearing all black, who happened to be wearing sunglasses on a cloudy day. You know, people do anything for fashion. But in the end, I took out my phone and I tried to film him. I put my phone this close to his face. And this man didn't even flinch. He didn't look at me. He made no reactions. He was like a robot. And that's when and he just walked right off. And this has happened again. And this is how I learned, there might have been people literally standing outside staking out. They're not touching me or anything. They're just standing there staring at me to send me a message that, what I assume to be a certain powerful government knows where I live, and they want me to know that they know where I live. So for matters like this, when I communicate with the Australian government, the specific officers who are tasked to deal with my case have been very attentive. Again, they've spent the time to talk to me and take evidence. And this is not a criticism of AFP or the specific officer, but I would say that I have felt frustrated that as a, hate the word, but as a victim, I have not been let in on the investigation. I don't know who's targeting me. I don't know what the authorities know about my case and my safety. I've been I feel as though I've been kept in the dark, and there hasn't been enough transparency on my specific case. And I will bring up that in the past week, I'm sure all of us have seen that the U.S. District Attorney in New York has published this press release that said they had busted 40 MPS, Ministry of Public Security officers in China. They have found their names and their unit name of these officers in China who are conducting trolling and harassment on social media, against Chinese dissidents in the U.S. primarily, I assume. But as far as I know, none of the dissidents I know in the U.S. who might have been harassed by these very Chinese officers were told, that they were the targets of the trolling of these specific officers. So again, there's such an information vacuum here. And whenever I talk to my fellow victims, when we exchange information, I learn so much more about the MSS, about the MPS. But right now, there just seems to be no public forum or private forum, for that matter, for this information to really flow, for law enforcement, for Twitter, for Facebook, for YouTube, for all these victims to kind of exchange information. And I feel as though everybody has a small piece of the jigsaw, and the information is not being pulled together, and we're not utilizing. And again, when I go to law enforcement, we talk, we discuss, but things move very slowly, and there never seems to be enough resources. And my last point being, I read a few months ago that, the director of ASIO has come out and said ASIO was under pressure from the academic community and the business community to go easy, to go soft on Chinese spies. And all of that combined, I just don't know. I just really don't know what kind of message we're sending to, young people in Australia, to Chinese Australians who want to see a more democratic China, who want to see better relations between the two countries. What messages are we sending? Are we really still encouraging people to even aspire to freedom of speech and democracy? Or are examples like mine and Badiucao, or what the ASIO director is coming out and saying, are we just giving up? Are we just, that's a big question, but I'll just leave it there.
Thank you. And look, I mean, I absolutely take your point about that reporting about pressure on ASIO. I think we should all take some comfort from the fact that Mike Burgess publicly disclosed that, and I think indicated his determination as the leader of ASIO to resist that. But I also appreciate your point about the indictments in the United States and the value it has simply of the Department of Justice and FBI publishing those indictments, naming those people. That would have a powerful disincentive effect. And in my view, we do not do that often enough in Australia, and I think we could learn something from that. Badiucao, I'll go to you, and then we'll be out of time.
Sure. Before I speak, I actually would like to share a video on the screen, which is a threatening video that I received recently. And so I think it's very important to keep this in record and just to allowing people to know that what sort of harassment that I'll be
来，好了，操你妈！老子现在就去干你去！操，敢不敢发地址？来，看好了，操你妈！老子现在就去干你去！操，敢不敢发地址？
Might just get you to just describe that for us so that we've got in the Hansard form, obviously translation will also be necessary, of what that represented, and we can document it that way.
So what we watched is actually an online threat that I received from a person who claimed to be Australian citizen, but born in China, speak Mandarin. So what he's doing is showing his Australian passport, to telling me that he's also from here in Australia, and he's asking me to sending him an address so he could come and harm me directly. So this is, a living example for what kind of death threat and harassment that we're facing in a daily basis. But also I have experience of being followed like Vicky on the street in Melbourne, particularly during the time like when my ABC documentary released in 2019. So this kind of pattern, unfortunately, I don't think it has been addressed properly. For me, or my family here has no sense of safety, to be honest. I do, appreciate all the police, from the, local police to state police, to the federal police, and ASIO to working on that case. But my experience is I've been repeating those incidents and the stories to many different departments, many years. But what we receive as security or protection is not comparable with the effort that we're trying to notify the authority. That I think, if we can have more mechanism to report and to gain protection, especially during the time for big events or even for important hearing like this, then it will give us more confidence to continue our campaign and works and continue speaking bravely. Because when you feel like you're fighting alone, then it's become a very difficult journey to take as an individual. The other difficulty that I feel between different police departments is sometimes departments who have enough knowledge about China's influence and seeing the espionage as an important problem, but they do not have the manpower. But the manpower will majorly for the local police for the state police, but they would need a lot of education to kind of just speed up with our knowledge of why, those incidents that were mentioned is quite dangerous and there is a foreign government behind. So this knowledge gap is something that we can definitely working on with different police departments.
I'd like to thank you both, not just for your evidence to the committee today, but the courage that you've demonstrated in your journalism and your research and your activism and your art. It is an incredibly difficult thing when faced with the long arm of an authoritarian state very determined to silence both of you, that you have persisted and that you continue to be undeterred in that. That is a very remarkable thing, and it's, I think, this committee's objective to make sure that you can do that safely in Australia and feel safe, and that's what you're entitled to. So we're really very grateful for your time and your evidence, your insights today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.